All right, today I'll be giving a PowerPoint presentation on the JWE3 roster. We previously did a video on this in a tier list format, but I think now we have actually a lot more information to go off of when it comes to speculating on what the final roster for the game will look like. So we're going to kind of break down this discussion into four rough categories. We'll discuss the hybrids, then we'll discuss new species, then we'll discuss the species that are probably safe and very likely cut, kind of a two in one. And then we'll break down kind of my prediction for the final roster based on all this logic here. We've had a lot of new information in the last week, so we got a lot more to go off of now for determining the roster than we did originally, where we had very little information. So, first things first, we had this article on August 14th. It was a behind the scenes article about kind of what goes into them creating the dinosaurs. And it had this really valuable piece of information in here where they talked about the dimorphism and the juveniles. And it specifically says here, you'll notice the highlighted section, that the hybrids do not have family units. Every other dinosaur does. So, combining this with the previously known information that 7 out of 86 animals do not breed, now we know that these are definitively 7 hybrids, right? And there's 7 hybrids in 2, so it looks likely that all 7 hybrids from JWE2 make it into JWE3. This makes a lot of sense because they can be directly ported in. Without them needing a dimorphic form or a juvenile form, they can literally just copy and paste them, which is what I expect these to be. I expect these to be just one-to-one, essentially, with the first game. No remodeling, no new work really put into them. Maybe a new animation or something if they're doing some other expansions on animations, but that's about it. The other piece of information coming out of this is that the scavengers and small animals will breed and apparently have juveniles. Now, I found that kind of shocking. I kind of expected that it was quite likely the juvenile or the scavengers would breed, but wouldn't have juveniles, right? It's my understanding that in Planet Zoo, some of the small animals essentially breed directly into adult forms without a juvenile intermediate stage. They didn't just two adults get together and a new adult pops out. Which is really what I expected to see here. But like this strongly, like if this is written correctly, this is factually stating that there are like juvenile copies in the game, essentially. Now I put here that I'm unconvinced, and that's because this is an article stating this. This is not gameplay footage, which means this article could technically have misspoke, right? This could be a misunderstanding between the devs and the person who wrote the article, technically. This could be a misunderstanding or a misspeaking when writing the article, right? It's possible the person who wrote this knows that, for instance, scavengers don't have juveniles, and then when they were writing the article, they just didn't write it in a way that makes that clear, right? They put in this binary separation of hybrids and animals with family units, and if there's a little in between category in the form of scavengers that don't have juvenile forms, then they just maybe didn't make that distinction, even though they knew it. So I personally don't think we can assume directly from this that scavengers have juveniles, although it's looking likely, right? I just I we have seen before that Frontier has put stuff into articles that was objectively wrong. This has happened. This happened at some point in two's lifespan where they had to come out and say something or something. Literally, I think they changed an article. So we should not take this as word of God. We should treat this with a little bit of a grain of salt. We should expect it to be true, but we should be prepared for the expectation that's not, essentially. The other thing that comes from this is by soft confirming all 7 hybrids, we also soft concern. Geez, words are hard, huh? We also soft confirm Sinoceratops and Diplodocus and Camp Cretaceous stuff, right? Because Ankylodocus requires Diplodocus to make. It's unlikely to change the requirements for a hybrid. Sinoceratops is film canon, so it was already pretty much guaranteed in, but it has a hybrid, so if the hybrid's in, it has to be in as well. And then the fact that 2 of the hybrids are from Camp Cretaceous also means Camp Cretaceous stuff will be in base game. It will not be. They won't make a choice. They apparently will not make a choice to cut the Camp Cretaceous stuff from being slightly cartoony. It looks like that'll make it in, right? Previously in the tier list, as I was going through it, I made the decision myself generating that list to cut the Camp Cretaceous stuff, because the art style does kind of clash a little bit at times. So that's why I did that. But yeah, I mean, it's essentially soft confirmed. So let's talk about the new species, right? We don't know how many new species there are, but maybe we can ascertain a approximate guess at how many new animals are in the game based on like the video release schedules. Now they've said explicitly there is no actual release schedule, but like even without a strict schedule, we can still get a good sense of what they're planning and what is likely to be revealed. The revealed animals we've seen thus far then might provide clues. So, this is a table breaking down the release dates of a lot of the dinosaur showcases and feature focuses we've had so far. So we start with Lokiceratops on July 8th. This was followed by a feature focus the same week on Friday. Then we had like a gap week, and then they followed kind of the same excuse me, the same schedule. I should have tried to pause the video, but I couldn't get to it in time, so we're just gonna have to live with that being in the video. So yeah, they had kind of the same schedule then for the week after the gap week, with Utahraptor on Tuesday and family units on Friday, which also revealed to us Patagotitan, a new species, the only one we've had revealed from a non-profile video, although it has since gotten a profile. This was followed by another gap week, so that was looking like we had kind of a schedule going there, right? A species profile, a feature focus, then a week off, and then the same thing again. Except then in August that gets upended. Now on Thursday instead of Friday, we got a third feature focus. And then the following week, we got a species profile. So this looks like, well, maybe it's still kind of following that 2-week schedule, but maybe they wanted to split it up so they aren't putting out 2 videos in 1 week and 0 the next. But it's too soon to say that's actually what's happening here. And then after that, we had, the Gamescom week that we just got finished with, which had a ton of videos and a ton of news, including the Patagotitan species profile, and then, the revelation of like the balloon tours and the boats. So I don't think we can take the August 18th to 22 week as anything remotely resembling a typical week. It's a special week, probably the only one we get of that degree. But yeah, I mean, that's an atypical week. So using this information, we can basically see that there is kind of a schedule, especially if you consider that Satago was maybe just pushed back to try and like minimize gap weeks going forward, right? Ultimately, looking at the math here, we get 3 new species in 6 weeks, which is essentially a 2-week cadence for a new animal to be revealed. Given that the release date for the game is October 21st, we can essentially expect 4 more new species, maybe 5, on top of the 5 we already have. So I think 10 new species is probably more than I would have predicted initially, but is looking quite plausible at this point. So this would basically track with almost weekly species profiles going forward, mixing in a few old animals. Which makes sense to me that the videos would ramp up a little bit more as they get closer to release. Sorry, I had to clear my nose. So, moving on. On the topic of Patagotitan and Psittacosaurus, these two were kind of some weird includes that have been revealed for the game, because they're both pretty redundant with animals from Jurassic World of Rebirth. So I think the big thing we can take away from these two animals is that the Rebirth roster doesn't really influence what animals are going to be added to the game. As, since Patagotitan and Psittacosaurus are a bit redundant with Titanosaurus and Aqualops. Now, I'll get into Rebirth a little bit again later, but I think the point I'm making here is that this is how it applies to the decision to add new animals, but I think rebirth could have some different consequences as well on deciding which animals make it in, which ones get cut, right? Um, so yeah, this will come back a little bit. Now, a topic that's been floating around as well is the reuse of assets and animations. Um, Now, given the reduced roster in JWE3 and the amount of time it takes um, to add a dimorphic variant and a juvenile for every variant, it makes a lot of sense that those variants that are not film canon will be cut, especially in the case of like, well, I mean, specifically for the animals that have been canonized, which I guess is every variant that would be cut. This is a little redundant. This paragraph could have been rewritten. Um, but yeah, my point is that, we got this list here of these animals. Allosaurus, we got the frontier design in JW1 before we got the adult in Battle of Big Rock because they were, you know, trying to come up with an adult for the Fallen Kingdom juvenile. Dronatus was introduced before it was um, even speculated about for Dominion. Same with like Giga and Iguanodon. Kentrosaurus, Majungasaurus, Tyrannosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, and Suchomimus have had new designs from Chaos Theory and Camp Cretaceous after they were added to the game as well. So essentially, all of these animals have a frontier design that would require its own dimorphic variant and juvenile, and it seems rather unlikely that since they have to cut a bunch of animals, it seems rather unlikely that they would dedicate the time to doing so for those animals that are non-canon, those forms of animals that are non-canon. Now, this does kind of suck because some like the Allosaurus and Iguanodon are really great designs, and I don't want to see them go. But it doesn't make sense to cut an animal wholesale to support a variant for an animal that's already in the game, right? Why would Frontier, as a company that wants to try to please its customers, have Iguanodon in the roster twice when they could have Iguanodon and an entirely different animal in the roster, right? So it looks pretty likely that these Frontier variants will be cut altogether. We've never seen any hint that any of these variants are in the game so far. Um, and so if they're cut altogether, these animals can kind of be recycled wholesale. If they want to reuse the animations, the rigging, even the model to some degree, it makes perfect sense to do so if these animals are never coming back in any form. Um, and it's probably a lot easier to rework a model or at least to use the existing animations from a model than to create something completely from scratch. And this was something that people brought up when the Patago Titan was revealed because it has a pretty strong resemblance to the Frontier Dreadnoughtus. It's different. The posture on the neck, I'm pretty sure, is different. It's been a little while since I looked closely at the hideous Frontier Dreadnoughtus, but um, so this seems plausible. It's certainly plausible that even if the posture's changed, um, that can be just made as edits to a skeleton, right? Rather than creating a whole new skeleton and animation rig for the animal, they can just edit an existing one for an animal that's essentially being cut forever. Um, so this might apply to other animals, right? This wasn't really something that was talked about much before Patago Titan. Patago Titan was really the first one that kind of felt like it. And then retroactively, it gets me thinking, like, were there any hints that the Loki Ceratops reused any animations from, say, the Pachyrhinosaurus? Because that animal's likely going to be cut for a eventual Chaos Theory redesign. Now, I didn't go back through all the Loki Ceratops footage and try to like match it to Pachyrhinosaurus footage to see if there were any hints that the rigs were reused, but um, if there was, that would be a very nice piece of evidence for this idea. I just don't think it's necessary because the Loki Ceratops could also be completely new, and that's not unusual. It's also possible that we see some animals that are gone from the roster at launch, which may eventually come back to the game, also get partially recycled into new species or reuse animations. It's entirely plausible. I think that, for instance, the Guanlong could be a partial rework of Proceratosaurus or borrow a bunch of its animations. And Proceratosaurus may not make it into base game in that case, or probably doesn't make it into base game in that case. It may relaunch somewhere down the line as like a free dinosaur, and then there'll kind of be some shared animations, and That's not terribly unusual because there's already shared animations in the game anyway, right? I think it's possible the same case could be seen maybe with Psittacosaurus and like Homalocephaly. Um, so it's another point. Like if there's an animal that seems like it's unlikely to get into the game just because of the limitations of the roster, it's possible that we could see the animation set from the animal at least shifted partially to a new species. So just kind of another way these assets can be reused. Another way to think about, you know, how they might be optimizing the workload for new animals for three's launch. So going off of all that we've said here, we can talk about what we think the 5 remaining species in the game might be. The 5 that 5 new species that we haven't seen yet. What those animals might be. So I think the first thing coming off of that is we absolutely 100% need a Japanese species in the game. It makes very little sense to me logically to launch the game with Japan as kind of the new premier biome that they've showed off a lot, and to make Japan a location in the game you go to and then not have a Japanese species. It doesn't feel right to me. Um, so I think there's likely to be Japanese representation on the dinosaur roster. So looking through the list of dinosaurs discovered in Japan, there's not too many. The most notable one to me, I think, is Fukui Raptor, which is a Megaraptoran. That feels like the best bet for what they might add. Um, and this would allow them to potentially recycle animations from Australovenator, assuming Australovenator is cut, which I think is a fairly likely cut. When we get to the rosters later, we'll see that the small carnivore roster, especially, is pretty packed at this point. So finding space for something like Ostro doesn't really look viable. Although, in some sense, part of why it's packed is because, well, we're putting Fukui Raptor in the same slot that would have been Australovenator. So it's a little disingenuous to say that the reason Ostro gets cut is because the roster is too packed, but I think you get my point. Fukui would be an interesting chance for them to put in a feathered Megaraptoran. Then when they bring back Australovenator, Australovenator still has its own niche compared to Fukui Raptor. So I think that is probably the best include we could get for a Japanese species. So that's the first one out of my 5 for my speculation here. I should say, my speculation on like new species and my roster I've developed at the end of these slides are completely independent of my previous roster and my previous speculation on new species. I am approaching this with a open mind. I did not review my old video, so this may be contradictory with some of the stuff I said, a month ago, and I think that's good. It should be contradictory because now we have a lot more information. So, for the remaining 4 species, I think there's another obvious one, which is getting a new Abelisaur. I think a new Abelisaur is we're way past due for one of these guys. We haven't had a new one ever. We launched the game JWE1 with Majunga and Carno. Well, not technically, but Carnotaurus was added slightly after launch when the FK content was added. But the Fallen Kingdom content is essentially base game for JWE1. It was just held back for release. The game was designed with it integrated essentially. So the question is, this new Abelisaur, what could it be? And it can reuse Majungasaurus assets because Majungasaurus is likely cut pending a Chaos Theory redesign. At least it's an obvious choice for them to cut it for a Chaos Theory redesign. So we got those animations just sitting there ready to go, allowing a quicker workflow for a new animal. So what Abelisaur should get in? If you go poking around the broader dinosaur community, I would think probably the most famous remaining Abelisaur that's not in the game at this point would be Rajasaurus. Rajasaurus gets a bit of a boost from Prehistoric Planet, increasing its popularity. And it's, it's found in kind of a unique location on the globe. We don't really have any Indian dinosaurs, so it would be kind of cool to have that. However, I favor Rugops as my inclusion in the roster. Rugops is a pretty small Abelisaur, which is pretty unique. I think a small scale Abelisaur would be a good counterpoint to the larger Mahjong and Carno. Um, I think Rugops also has kind of an interesting and unique name that makes it stand out a little bit more. An interesting and unique name without it being the nightmare of pronunciation that the rest of the Abelisaurs on this list are. Furthermore, Rugops is included in the Indominus Rex genome, so it is a semi-canon animal. Like, its DNA exists in the universe even if it hasn't been fully cloned. Like, part of the genome exists. The Indominus Rex genome is the same reason for including the next three Abelisaurs here as kind of honorable mentions for what animal it could be in, because Pycnonemosaurus, Quilmasaurus, I don't know, man, and Viavenator are also all in the IREX genome. So, like, technically any of these could work, either for film canon reasons or for popularity reasons. I just think Rugops is probably the best split between those. Thank you for walking away, dog. Now, another animal I think we're really overdue in JWE, the broader franchise, for getting a new version of is a Spinosaurid. And again, we can reuse Suchomimus assets, assuming Suchomimus is cut for a Chaos Theory remodel. I also think a Spinosaurid, a new one, is highly likely in JWE3, given that the semi-aquatic mechanics are kind of a small new selling point, and this is a chance for them to have an animal to kind of show it off, right? Like, launching the game with semi-aquatic dinosaurs as a feature and then not doing any new semi-aquatic species would be weird. So I think some sort of Spinosaurid is the likely inclusion. Now, personally, I think Irritator is the most likely one because it has funny name. But Ichthyovenator cuts a very unique silhouette and is also a very popular choice. So it's also, a fairly likely one. I would not object to a deeper cut like Ceratosuchops or one of the new, like, Iberian Spinosaurids or something. But, like, Irritator feels like the one to have in. I think that Irritator could lead to some funny situations in the game, with it being irritating. Some other ideas here. I think for my fourth inclusion, we definitely need a new Hadrosaur. Again, we're like due for a Hadrosaur. We have not had a new Hadrosaurid since, like, what, Titan? I guess talking about the larger ornithopod group, since, like, whatever was last out of Titan, Tyrannosaurus, and Iguanodon. This also is a chance for us to have a more accurate quadrupedal Hadrosaur. We need more quadrupedal Hadrosaurs. We got, Maiasaura and a Monosaurus, but we have a lot of bipedal ones. And to that end, this could actually use some reworked Iguanodon and/or Tyrannosaurus animations or rigging. Obviously, the Iguanodon and Tyrannosaurus have pretty different body plans, but I think ultimately their animation sets could translate to a more standard Hadrosaur form without, the hench arms or the back sail. So my inclusions, I think Shantungosaurus is interesting as the biggest Hadrosaur. I think a Rex scale Hadrosaur would be a very interesting inclusion in the game. Kind of a unique size category for that animal. I think that would be cool. It's popular as well. The other option is Lambeosaurus. This has always kind of been felt like a hole in the roster a little bit. I think on the other hand, Lambeosaurus doesn't offer that much beyond just another crested Hadrosaur, so I'm not sure how much we really need it. Although it would be interesting to have a Lambeosaura that is quadrupedal for more accuracy. That would be pretty cool. I would not object to having either of these in. Ultimately, I favor Shantungosaurus. Is it Shantong or Shangtong? I have no idea. I think I checked it at one point, but I don't know if this slide is correct. Whatever. You know what I mean. That's the important thing. Uh, so I think another candidate for being in would be a large carnivore. It's been quite a while since we had a new large carnivore. Oh, that's not true. We had Tarbosaurus, but like Tarbosaurus didn't feel new because it was just a reworked T Rex. Um, I think a new, truly unique large carnivore is something we haven't gotten in a long time. Um, so this could be a rework of the Frontier Giganotosaurus model or animation set or both. Potentially just reworking this as a relative of Giganotosaurus, maybe Mapusaurus, Meraxes, or Tyrannotitan. These are all kind of around there in the family tree, so any of these could work. Ultimately, when it came down to me deciding which 5 animals I think are gonna be the remaining species, I decided to drop the large carnivore and not include one of those. Instead, I included one of the animals here on this list, which I'll point out when I get to it. I think most of the other things listed here are candidates for DLC. If they like, like there's a limit to how many new animals we can get at launch, right? But we also, of course, will have DLC packs, and I think some of these animals could show up kind of as described here, these reworked animation sets, but in DLC. So I think the most obvious way to rework the Frontier Kentrosaurus is to make it into Tujangosaurus. It's a fairly well-known stegosaurid. It's really the stegosaurid that's like missing from the roster in two. Like when you talk about famous stegosaurids, it's like Stegosaurus, Worosaurus, Kentrosaurus, Tujangosaurus, maybe Dravidosaurus, but I don't even know if he's valid anymore. I think he went invalid and then kind of went back to possibly being valid, if I remember correctly. I don't remember. But at least those are the ones that stick out to me. But yeah, I ultimately don't see us getting Tujangosaurus in base game. Uh, the same by the same token, I don't see us getting Neovenator in the base game at all either. This is a early Cretaceous Allosauridoid or Neovenatoroid, but point is, it's an early Cretaceous Allosaur relative. And it should work pretty well as just a rework of the Frontier Allosaurus design. So if they did this, this would probably end up being one of my favorite large carnivores pretty quickly. But I think ultimately it doesn't have a standout spot in the roster for launch, so I don't really see Neovenator showing up right away. I put down Kamuisaurus or whatever here as an alternate Japanese dinosaur. This is kind of a generic, very vanilla hadrosaur. So I don't really see this making it in because I don't think this is distinctive enough to be like the Japan dinosaur. Instead, the one I favor is actually Plateosaurus. People have been asking for Plateosaurus forever. It is kind of a template dinosaur. If you ask a young child to write down 25 dinosaurs before Jurassic Park was a thing, at least, Plateosaurus would have probably made that list, right? It's like the iconic prosauropod. It's like one of the biggest name Triassic animals. We need more Triassic representation in general. We have no prosauropod representation. It seems like a very obvious inclusion. The only thing I could think of is maybe Plateosaurus is too unique, and they'd save it for DLC. But by the same token, we've gotten Protoceratops and Psittacosaurus, which are both pretty unique animals with features like the quills and stuff that make them very different than anything we have in game, really. So I think it's still possible that we get Plateosaurus and it's being held on the back burner to be revealed later. So that would be my fifth pick, Plateosaurus. Another animal I feel like we're really due for is a new Ornithomimosaur, like not a Dinocheirid, and a feathered one at that. So I think like a feathered Ornithomimus, for instance, would be another thing I would expect to see maybe at some point, but I decided to bump it from the launch roster here, in part because of the Archaeornithomimus reveal that we'll discuss in a little bit. Doesn't feel like there's much room left for more Ornithomimosaurs in base game. Another important thing to note here is this leaves us with no aquatics or pterosaurs being added, no new ones. Um, in fact, given the fact that we've never seen an aquatic animal other than Mosasaurus in any footage so far, I kind of feel like lagoons are being de-emphasized in JWE3. Um, they may be of less importance. We may not see as much support for them, at least at launch or initially. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely feeling like the roster for the lagoons has to be much smaller than the roster for the aviaries, given that we've seen like six pterosaurs to one aquatic. But we'll get into this more later when we're going through the full roster, just how much I really think that difference is. So, yeah, these are my picks for the 5 remaining new species to be revealed before release. Of course, complete speculation. There's 5 animals. Complete speculation that these are the 5 animals, but I think I've outlined my arguments pretty well. So, yeah, Fukui Raptor, Rugops, and Irritator for carnivores slash piscivores, and then 2 more herbivores in the form of Shantungosaurus, which is Shantung and not Shangtung. Good, confirmed, and Platyosaurus or Platyosaurus, I forget. Okay, moving on. Did that? Okay, weird. Never mind. Sorry. You can't have a PowerPoint without at some point hitting the forward button, not going forward, and then getting confused and hitting the back button and forward button a few times. Like that has to happen in every PowerPoint. That's like a requirement. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about for a piece of evidence as to the full roster of the game is the recent reveals from the marketplace feature focus video. So the big thing here is during that video, they purchased some Gallimimus on the market from a disreputable source, and instead of Tyrannosaurus is delivered to the park. Now, if you pay close attention to that gameplay footage, you will see that it's spliced together from multiple takes. The ID number of the T-Rex changes during that footage, and there's some other stuff that's different. So when they're initially in the marketplace, we see a list of animals revealed on the screen, which includes the reveal that Diplodocus and Troodon are returning to the game. But then when they go to deliver the dinosaur to the park, there is a hidden cut, and the footage after that cut has a different set of animals in the marketplace. Now, watching this footage casually or at low resolution, you're not going to notice that. But if you zoom in, which is what this picture on the side is, with I've adjusted the contrast a bit to try to get the names to pop out, you can see a whole bunch of new animals revealed in the marketplace that we had not had confirmed previously. So what I think happened here is the footage is faked. They ordered Gallimimuses. They made a cut. They set it up to create a T-Rex listing for the same price as the Gallimimuses. Then they recorded them buying that T-Rex listing. And then they started the footage from the point where it's being confirmed to come into the park so that it looks like it's still the Gallimimuses that are coming in. And this way they get a T-Rex to be delivered instead of those galleys. So that's probably why all the details in the video change, except for the fact that it's the same price for the new delivery. So this screen, if you look at it, the whole thing in the video, I've only cropped out part of it here. It reveals Apatosaurus, not shocking. We expect that. Archaeornithomimus and Chungingosaurus, both very shocking. And then a bunch more film canon animals that were essentially guaranteed. Lystrosaurus, Giganotosaurus, Microceratus, Morose, and Nasutoceratops. So, the takeaways here, there's a bunch of film canon animals being confirmed, including some small animals that have very limited roles. Lystrosaurus and Microceratus don't do that much. Neither does Morose, but they're all confirmed as being in. The shocking one here really is Archaeornithomimus. I think everybody bet on Struthi making it in alongside Galley and Archie getting cut, because having 3 naked chickens filling the same niche in the reduced roster feels bad. But Archaeornithomimus is confirmed in. So what does that mean? I think that means Struthiomimus is probably cut. My guess here is that Frontier feels that Archaeornithomimus is semi-canon because its name is mentioned in Jurassic World. So they opted for the obviously canon Gallimimus and this guy over Struthi, which feels wrong to me because Struthi feels like an icon of the franchise, but I just can't see all three making it. Trunkingosaurus, on the other hand, I'm not that shocked by. I'm not shocked by the inclusion of an Asian stegosaurid, and honestly, whichever one they picked would not have shocked me. Chung is my favorite. Who's missing is G, I now realize, but whoopsies. So I'm very happy that this one got picked, but I would not have been surprised to see Huango or Gigant Spino in this slot. I think the other two will be cut. I think we'll only get one of the three. Um, so yeah. Okay. Now, another note to bring up here on this marketplace footage is that the footage is full of some weird things. There's a lot of issues and inconsistencies in it. Look at some of these like ridiculous appeal numbers here. 14,000 appeal for Carnotaurus or Utahraptor. They're both the exact same value. 14,650 appeal exactly for both groups. 2 females and 3 males for both. Very weird. Very weird. Very weird that there would be 5 Utahraptors that are worth 14,000. Very weird that 5 Carnotaurus and 5 Utahraptor would be both exactly 14,650 appeal. That's just strange. Patago Titans, 6 Patago Titans for 200K is insane. Like, that's nuts. 5 Allosaurus, 800 appeal. What? These numbers make no sense almost universally across the board. Plus, the Troodon is herbivorous. Now, interestingly enough, Troodon herbivory is a speculated thing that there's some evidence for, that they're probably like omnivorous or whatever, at least. But I don't think this is a sign that they're actually making Troodon an herbivore. I mean, this is like full herbivore, even, not even an omnivore. So this is probably just a glitch or something. I kind of wonder if all this marketplace footage is faked, right? I wonder if the marketplace actually isn't properly implemented in game yet, and they kind of just filled it up with placeholder stuff and like faked it, faked the video. Like everything they showed is what it will do. It's just not properly fully implemented yet, and so that's why we got a bunch of garbage here. I don't know. It's weird. Every one of these has 2 females, varying amounts of males. Like it seems crazy how many animals you can get here on the marketplace too. Like I don't know. It doesn't look right. All this footage is like certainly these numbers are not release numbers, right? They can't be. Also, like every time we've seen any animal in game, it's kind of had the same appeal it has in JWE2. There's no way to get like this Carnotaurus appeal to make sense. Like this is completely crazy. So my point here I'm making though is ultimately because this footage is so weird and full of inconsistencies, I'm a little hesitant, if we go back a slide, to actually consider these guys confirmed down here. Because there's so much other weird shit going on that like am I completely 100% certain Archaeornithomimus is actually in 3? No, I'm not. I think it's likely. We're going to treat it for this video as if it's confirmed. But I think there's a possibility that the footage is misleading and that it actually might not be in. So I just wanted to point that out. So now we can go ahead and talk about animals that are likely safe and likely cut. Pretty likely that all or almost all film canon animals are in. People assume this from the start. This was a safe assumption, and then the marketplace footage essentially confirms this if we, trust the barely seen names in the background. That right there confirmed like 6 old, I guess, film canon animals is making it in. Another thing that is likely safe is everything from Camp Cretaceous, given that we've soft confirmed the Camp Cretaceous hybrids probably Tyrannosaurus, Kentrosaurus, and Nothosaurus, and Monolopho make it into. I would also say that it's likely that recent popular DLC animals are going to be in base game. I don't think they'll try to get away with selling these again. I think that would be uh, unreasonable, both like from a consumer standpoint and honestly from like a business marketing standpoint. Like to expect people to pay again for the best recent animals across the board seems rather unlikely because that would just piss people off. We already know Utah Raptors base game. Um, we know Thanatos and Concavenator are coming back, but I mean they are in paid DLC with the deluxe edition, but the deluxe edition also historically has established the precedent of making us pay for old animals with Huangosaurus and JWE2. So I'm not going to use the fact that Thanatos and Conch are in the deluxe edition as an argument that other good animals, good popular recent animals will be cut. I think the opposite is true, and that Thanatos and Conch are going to be kind of the worst of that. I don't expect much of the recent popular animals to be resold. I don't really expect many animals to be resold. I could see them doing a thing where like you buy a DLC, it's like three new animals and one old animal, and then putting a few free ones in like the free update, right? So there's like one you have to pay for, two are free, and the one you pay for comes with like three completely new ones or something. I could see them doing something like that. But I think the vast majority of the missing roster comes back for free. I'll be genuinely shocked if they try to charge for everything. I can't see that going down well. So, likely cuts then, given the information we have. I think the Asian stegosaurs are pretty heavily redundant with each other, and since Chung is confirmed, that's probably the only one. As I mentioned before, Struthiomimus is an icon, but 3 ornithomimosaurs feels like too many with the limited roster. So I think Struthi is shockingly cut. Deinonychus is an animal I could see getting a total rework and getting resold to us later. I think it makes sense to cut an animal that's unpopular. And I think in the case of an animal that's very unpopular, it makes a lot of sense to remodel it a bit and then sell it as opposed to give it to us free. I think it would be kind of fun if they did a Deinonychus that echoed the original design, right? That had like the fin on the head and the fin on the tail, except they were feathers. I think that'd be hilarious. Keep like the same kind of profile almost, but just make it feathered instead of finned. That'd be very funny. I'm gonna stand by on the idea that Dracorex is likely cut, possibly recycled into a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus, because again, it seems to me like a good way for them to save a bit of effort. They already have a fully modeled, detailed juvenile Pachycephalosaurus in JWE2. Why would they not just use that? We've never seen a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus really in the franchise. I mean, the one in the Lost World is kind of undersized. So, I mean, I guess you could make an argument that's the juvenile, but they kind of haven't been skewing that close to film juveniles anyway. See the Allosaurus situation. I also think we likely lose most or all Notosaurids. The Notosaurs are all pretty forgettable in general. They're not. None of them are terribly popular. It's likely that Geolopterus is cut. Eventually we're going to get a Neurognathus in Rebirth. And the gameplay footage we've seen so far has never showed an insect feeder. We've seen the feeder tab in its entirety. No insect feeders. That's evidence that Geolopterus is gone. Geolopterus stands out to me though because it's a popular animal. People really like that little guy. So if he's cut, that seems like a kind of nuts. That's a big exclusion in my mind from the DLC animals. And maybe like this is the animal we probably have one of the strongest arguments for it being cut. And it kind of counters my theory of like recent popular DLC animals not getting cut. But who knows? Maybe it'll come back. Maybe they're gonna I don't know, maybe we get insect feeders back alongside a Neurognathus in the Rebirth DLC and Geolopterus comes back in a free update at the same time. I don't know. Complete speculation. But yeah, I mean, it's looking like it's probably gone. I also expect the animals that we've seen in Chaos Theory that have been given semi-canon designs in Chaos Theory to be cut and then remodeled and sold to us again. So Mahjong, Suko, and Pachyrhino. I fully expect these to be resold as part of the Chaos Theory DLC. And then I think most of the remaining pterosaurs got to go because the roster's already looking pretty full, and most of the ones we have left are pretty redundant with each other. So there's that too. Continuing on, it's looking very likely that Alamosaurus has been replaced by Patagotitan, and the Frontier Dronotus as well, but I didn't really include the variants on here. Alamosaurus cuts a pretty distinctively similar profile to the Patagotitan. It'd be kind of weird to have them both in. It's not impossible, but like, it's not looking good for him. Now this one is maybe controversial. I put down Mamenchisaurus as a likely cut. Now the reason I did this, we got a lot of sauropods already in the roster. And Mamenchisaurus is just kind of another sauropod. It doesn't do anything distinctive in the game. It really doesn't deserve a slot on its own merits, right? The only reason Mamenchisaurus should get in is because it's a film canon animal, but the animal we have in the game in no way resembles the film animal, right? And that's why I think we could see it cut. This is another animal they could remodel and sell to us again as a Lost World styled Mamenchisaurus, which, yes, is inaccurate, but, is the way it looked in the film. Another list of cuts. I think we're going to lose a lot of the aquatics. So I think the most obvious ones are Tylo, Elasmo, and Leopleurodon. These are all fairly spiky and unpopular fellas. They're not, I just don't see them being the ones that get picked. These ones seem like the clear losers of the aquatic competition. Another clear loser to me is Centausaurus. Out of all the potential hadrosaurs, I just don't see this one making it. Olorotitan in 2 is just kind of better Centausaurus. They have very similar colors or whatever, and there's no love there, so I just don't really see that one making it. We also do have a decent chunk of hadrosaurids and ornithopods in the game anyway. Soft confirmed. The Para is the only one that's actually confirmed, I think, but I mean, there's a lot in the franchise, so I just don't see. I don't see how Centau can make it. I also wrote down Pentaceratops here. Again, just kind of thinking about classes of dinosaurs, what is most likely to get cut, and out of all the ceratopsians, we have a lot in the game right now, a lot of confirmed ceratopsians in JWE3. And Pentaceratops is the one that has the least franchise relevance, and it's never felt that relevant in JW1 or 2. It shows up really late in 1 to the point where it does nothing probably ever. And same thing in 2. It's very late in the ceratopsian tree. Why would you ever push for Pentaceratops? I just don't use the animal. So I think it's the clear loser out of the ceratopsian competition. Now, I put down Tarbosaurus here as a likely cut, but I actually don't think this is a likely cut. I think it's a plausible cut. I just didn't have a plausible cut slide, so I put it on here instead. Tarbosaurus is only semi-canon, and it's not a popular design, so this is something I could really see get bumped from 3. I think the other Camp Cretaceous dinosaurs all make it in, the ones that are essentially canon, but I mean, this one just kind of isn't confirmed, so the status of Hidden Adventure has never really been confirmed. And it's lost media now. It's kind of weird. All right, so that whole ramble there is me laying the foundation for what is coming up next, which is actually going through by each kind of dinosaur class, however you want to think about it, and building up the full roster of 86 species here one by one. So let's do that, starting with the hybrids. These are the 7 hybrids from the base game, from JW2, that are all likely base game in 3, all ported in directly 1-to-1, I assume, with no substantial changes of any form. Out of these, only Indominus Rex has actually been confirmed, but, I mean, a lot of these are almost certainly in, and it doesn't seem like a coincidence that there's 7 hybrids in 3 and 7 and 2, right? 7 hybrids being in 3 really just makes it seem like it's the same 7. Plus, it'd be kind of weird for them to cut the hybrids a second time since they were cut at the launch of 2 and we didn't get them until near the end. So, yeah. Moving on to large carnivores. So that gives us 7 animals. Large carnivores gives us 6 more animals, up to 13. I initially started here with just Allo, Giga, Spino, and Tyrannosaurus, which are all the ones that are mostly confirmed. Specifically, the film variants of Allo and Giga, and not the Frontier variants. But I decided we needed some more large carnivores, so I put the pair of Acrocanthosaurus and our Carcharodontosaurus in here as well to kind of give us the standard, JWE spread of large carnivores that we've kind of always had. Acro and Carchar, of course, are both from JPOG. I don't treat JPOG animals as guaranteed because I don't think they are. A lot of people have been running around saying they think JPOG animals are essentially guaranteed, and I don't buy that. Especially with the addition of some more small herbivores to the roster. It just kind of leaves less room for something like Homalocephaly. But maybe, I won't be shocked if the JPOG animals do make it in. It's just the roster is tight, right? So I consider the fact that Acro and Carchar were in JPOG to be bonus points, makes them more likely to get in, but I don't consider their presence in JPOG to be a guarantee for them being in 3. For medium carnivores, Albertosaurus was lightly confirmed by EvoSquare, seeing a statue in one of her in a private gameplay session. It's also got franchise history being from Jurassic Park Trespasser, so I think it's a pretty likely inclusion. Also a JPOG animal. Then we got a bunch of franchise guys here that are confirmed or unconfirmed, but come on, they're not cutting Ceratosaurus. We know he's in. Concavinator was confirmed, of course, in the DLC. Irritator was my speculated inclusion. Again, EvoSquare thought she might have saw a Metriacanthosaurus statue. So I've included it on the list. We kind of had a space that could be a medium carnivore. Metriacanthosaurus is pretty iconic to JWE. It's like the standout, paleo accurate JWE1 design, kinda, and still is very nice in 2. It's got a long-standing franchise history despite never actually showing up in the movies, with it being present in both the original Jurassic Park and in Jurassic World. So it makes a lot of sense for an animal to stay in the game. And then Utyrannus I've included as well for a possible sighting in one of the recent gameplay footage videos. But also it's one of the most popular feathered species. It cuts a very unique profile, a very unique spot in the roster. And I think people would be really mad if this was cut and they had to pay for it again or wait for it. I think this is one of the best animals in the game design wise, and it's gonna make it in. It's all but confirmed essentially. I'll be shocked if it's cut. Now we're onto the small carnivore roster. This is fairly cramped. The medium carnivores leave us off at 21 animals, and this gives us another 11. A few of these are confirmed: Dilo, Guanlong, Troodon, Utahraptor, and Velociraptor. But obviously we also get the canon animals: Atrociraptor, Dimetrodon, Monolopho, and Pyroraptor. And then, my speculated new species were Fukuiraptor and Rugops, which both slide in here as small carnivores. I don't think 11 small carnivores is that unusual. I think this is reasonable. There's a lot of raptors on this list, but there's a lot of raptors in the franchise, so kind of is what it is. So yeah, that's what I'm locking in for that. That gets us to 32. I originally had 3 scavengers, the 3 that were confirmed by the marketplace footage: Compy, Morose, and Oviraptor, the 3, canon ones. But at this point, essentially every other feathered animal was in the roster. And it seemed really weird to cut Sinosauropteryx, which is, again, one of the most accurate animals in the game, a pretty popular animal, even though he's a little fella. He seems like he should be in. So yeah, I put him here. After that, big chickens: Dinochirus, Gigantoraptor, Therizinosaurus. All popular, all recent. The only one of these I could see maybe being cut is Gigantoraptor. I think Therizinosaurus is film canon. He's essentially a lock, right? Dinocyrus is a semi-aquatic omnivore, a piscivore, herbivore. Very unique diet, very unique animal, very unique presence in the roster behaviorally. With them pushing deep water, I cannot see this animal possibly being cut. That would be insane. So Dinocyrus has got to be in. That's 39 out of 86. Moving on to sauropods. So we've got, of course, the film canon guys, Hepato, Brachii, Dreadnoughtus, with Momenchi getting cut, which is controversial. Could go either way. Patagotitan, of course, is the new guy on the block. Diplodocus was confirmed. And then my additions to this are the speculated Plateosaurus, new species. And then I figured we needed one of the small sauropods. It seems, just for the sake of roster diversity, Amarga or Niger had to make it in, I think, personally. So I put in Amarga. It feels a little more distinctive and iconic than Nigersaurus. That gets us to 46 animals. Moving on to ceratopsians. So we have 3 new ceratopsians confirmed for 3, which is shocking. Lokiceratops, Protoceratops, Psittacosaurus. On top of that, we've got soft confirmations on Microceratops and Pseudoceratops, and a hard confirmation on Triceratops, and Sinoceratops is speculated from the hybrids probably making it in. So these are all essentially a lock, giving us 7 ceratopsians, which feels like a large chunk of the roster. It feels like a large chunk of the roster to the point where I cannot imagine other ceratopsians making it in. Even Styracosaurus feels like it has to get cut, despite being a semi-canon animal and a novel species. I don't see the space for it. The roster is too crowded. As much as it pains me, Styracosaurus is one of my favorite dinosaurs, but I feel like he's got to go. So that leaves us at 53 as we get into the Thyreophorans. Ankylosaurus is confirmed. Obviously, Stegosaurus is confirmed for the Jurassic World variant specifically. And Chunkingosaurus, of course, has that soft confirmation from the Marketplace video. Which leaves us with space for maybe a few more. I put in, I think Kendrasaurus is essentially a lock, giving us 3 Stegosaurids. Having 3 Stegosaurids and 3 Ankylosaurids kind of felt right to me. Cutting all of the Notosaurids felt wrong. So I put back in Notosaurus. And then we needed 1 more to round out the 3. And to me, Euoplocephalus felt like the right call. It's a novel species, so it's got franchise history, something the other Ankylosaurids lack. And it's kind of the best looking design out of the lot, I think, personally. I think other people agree with that. I think Euoplocephalus was a pretty popular animal in JWE1. It's maybe fallen off a bit in 2, but I still feel like it's a pretty popular fella. It's also a fairly famous ankylosaurid, so it makes a lot of sense for it to be in for that reason too. So yeah, it made sense. I could see this being like Crichtonsaurus because of the name, or like Minmi maybe. I mean, a smaller ankylosaurid to round out the roster wouldn't be bad either, but you know, so ultimately I have to pick, right? There's a lot of animals in this list that could be any of 3 different animals, and you just gotta lock something in. So that gets us up to 59, hitting the ornithopods at 60 with Corythosaurus. Film canon animal, you know, probably in. Same with Iguanodon, Ouranosaurus from Camp Cretaceous. Parasaurus confirmed, and then of course I speculated on Shentungosaurus. We then round out the ornithopod roster with Admonosaurus because it is semi-canon to both the classic trilogy with its skull being in Lost World, and the new trilogy with it being in the Jurassic World roster. Plus, the design is iconic to the franchise. Admonosaurus is a very iconic animal, especially in JWE1 being on Mount Ceros. Can't see it being cut, even if Struthi is, which still shocks me. And then I rounded out the list with Maiasaura because cutting the good mother lizard from the game that adds breeding seems like an insane take. They could do it. I cut it from my initial video, from my tier list style speculation video on the roster. But I flip flopped on that since then. I feel like it's got to be in. It just makes too much sense. So I put it in here. Plus, it's a novel species and it's semi-canon because it has a identification card in the Lost World in Roland Tembo's guidebook. So, yeah, that's 7 ornithopods, which feels like a fair chunk, but not too many. So I think I could see this being correct. Mutabura gets cut in that case, though, which is kind of something I'll miss. All right, small herbivores at 67. We have Archaeornithomimus, which has been soft confirmed, followed up by Dryosaurus, which is again a novel species. It's an animal with a unique rig, a unique silhouette. It would feel really weird to cut, the only Hypsilophodon styled animal from the game. So I can't see them getting rid of Dryosaurus. Gallimimus, of course, confirmed, and a film canon animal, an iconic one at that. Lystrosaurus, soft confirmed. Pachycephalosaurus, lightly confirmed by a statue. I don't consider the statues a guarantee that an animal is in, because it's entirely plausible that they would put a statue in for an animal that's been cut, because the model exists already. They could just make it into a statue as almost a placeholder. So there's that. But I mean, it's a film canon animal. Like, it's going to be in Sigma Stiggy. So that's 72. 72 dinosaurs and hybrids. The rest of these will be pterosaurs and aquatics. I decided on 8 pterosaurs given the roster space. So that brings us up to 80. Dimorphodon was just confirmed by the Marketplace video and his film canon. Previously, we've confirmed Geosternbergia, the Jurassic World Pteranodon, Quetzalcoatlus, Thanatos Dracon, and Tropognathus. So, given all those, the most of the rest of the roster feels kind of redundant. My remaining picks were Cerodactylus as a novel species. It also works as kind of a alternate counterpoint to the Tropognathus as another, toothy, toothy pterosaur with distinctive keel on the beak, or however you want to think about it. And then I rounded out the list with Tapejara. Tapejara cuts a very unique profile. It's a smaller pterosaur, which we desperately need more of anyway. And this is a great chance, now that herbivores walk, it's a great chance for them to make it a herbivore. I think a frugivorous Tapejara would be great. All they'd have to do is give this guy a browsing animation and let him walk on the ground and go eat plants, and then fly around and then land and go eat plants. Like, this shouldn't be hard to do. This would be a very easy change to make. Launch is the time to make this change, and I think they should do this. So I've included it. It's a way for them to subtly retool an animal and make it more unique. It's like a perfect thing to do at the launch of a new game. And then for the aquatics, this leaves us with only 6, which honestly was kind of more than I was thinking. But when it came time to write down the list, I realized that there was support for most of these, so I had to kind of push it up to 6. Still less than the pterosaurs, but yeah. So my picks here for the aquatics: Archelon. It's a pretty popular and iconic animal, a recent DLC animal, unlikely to be cut because they don't want to make you pay for it again. And it uses platforms. I'm pretty sure we've seen the rock platforms in 3 already, right? I think so. Maybe not directly, but we've seen rocks in lagoons. So I could see that being in. Thank you, Dog, for your commentary. I appreciate it. Attenborosaurus was lightly confirmed by Evo Square. Seeing a statue for it. So I've added that to the list. This is our only Plesiosaurid, which is kind of a weird pick for that, but again, roster space is limited, so I can't see there being more than one Plesiosaurid. Personally, I'd prefer Styx, I think, at this point, but Attenborosaurus is pretty good too, so this is not a bad pick. Dunkleostes, I could never, oh my god. Donkey is lightly confirmed by the presence of a Dunk decoration. I think a point in favor of Dunk being in the game is the fact that he is in Rebirth is a cameo, right? I think a major species being in rebirth, um, as a new thing would point towards it being part of a rebirth DLC. But when it comes to the Dunk and the Megalodon cameos, those are really minor things. It makes a lot more sense for Frontier to just include the Dunk and the Meg in base game at launch, just to get them out of the way, so that they don't have to cover them in rebirth, right? And they can focus on other returning animals for that DLC. It's probably no coincidence that Dunk and Meg are both lightly confirmed by decorations. Uh, and again, they're both recent animals that like were popular from a DLC, and they probably won't want to charge people for these animals again or take them away so close to their release. I mean, this was a relatively recent DLC for both of these guys. You know, as far as recent goes for DLCs. Then yeah, also include Nothosaurus here because he is from Camp Cretaceous, so he is canon or semi-canon. I could see this guy being reworked to be semi-aquatic and not to be a lagoon species. It would be a little weird leaving the rock platforms only for the Archelon, but then again, maybe that's not that weird because if we've cut the aquatic roster by half, and well, we only had 2 animals that used the platforms in the first game, so cutting it down to 1 in the second game would be that weird. I think Nothosaurus would make a lot of sense as a semi-aquatic animal. It would support the semi-aquatic mechanic in the deep water. We see this animal running on land or running out of the water in Camp Cretaceous. So like it's established as being the very definition of semi-aquatic. It just makes a lot of sense. And it's also a way to kind of retool an animal to make it more appealing going into 3. The points against Nothosaurus being reworked to be semi-aquatic is it's probably a lot of work because they would kind of need to redo all the rigging. So I could see that being an argument against it, that like it's just not worth the effort to retool the Nothosaurus to be a land animal. So I think this could go either way. I think Nothosaurus is very likely in the game. I think it's much less likely that it's not a lagoon species, right? Call it, you know, a 90% chance of being in the game, but a 25% chance of being a non-lagoon species. I don't know. But I think there's a chance. That's my point. And then the only confirmed aquatic we have is Mosasaurus. So yeah. That's an 86 species roster. That's what we end up with. There's some notable things missing here. Honorable mentions. These are the things that stood out to me when I was putting this roster together is getting cut that are maybe controversial. So yeah, Tarbosaurus, semi-canon, fills the large carnivore niche. I could see this maybe being included at the expense of like Acro and Karkar. Could be a thing. Herrerasaurus, Proceratosaurus, and Stegosaurus are Jurassic Park species. They're there from the 1993 park. Them being cut feels really bad to me. They should be in the game, but they never show up on screen. 2 out of 3 of these don't actually even have a franchise design beyond Jurassic World Evolution. Like they're the obscure animals. So I could see them getting bumped. We also got a lot of small carnivores, so there's not a lot of room. And Guanlong is extremely redundant with Proceratosaurus, so there's a lot of points against, especially Proceratosaurus and Stegosaurus. And unfortunately, Herrerasaurus kind of just gets dragged along for the ride in my mind. Cutting Coelophysis feels weird because Coelophysis is, again, kind of a template dinosaur. It's like one of the dinosaurs of all time. If you make a list of popular dinosaurs before Jurassic Park was a thing, Coelophysis is likely to show up on that list. So yeah, cutting such an iconic animal feels strange, but again, there's like not that much room, and we've got a lot of canonized scavengers and small animals already. So, yeah, cutting them. It feels weird to include Coelophysis without Stegosaurus, and it feels weird to include Stegosaurus over Coelophysis. It feels like there's no way to win including one of these over the other because one is film canon, one isn't. But the one that isn't is more iconic. Styracosaurus feels like a strange cut, but again, there's just no space in the roster. This is a JPOG animal. This is a novel animal. I use the novel as a justification for a lot of other things I've added to this roster, but I couldn't use it to save Styracosaurus. just think there's too many ceratopsians. By the same token, Torosaurus has to go. This is again JPOG animal, but yeah, I think I just can't see there being enough space for all the JPOG animals because the ceratopsian and sauropod rosters are too crowded. So Torosaurus, Homalocephaly, and Camarasaurus go. Cutting Struthiomimus and Geolopterus feels crazy. These are both very popular animals. Struthiomimus is iconic to the entire franchise of JWE, being the first animal you released in the first game. And Geolopterus is kind of an iconic feathered pterosaur, of which we don't have many. These feel like they should be in, but there's strong evidence that they aren't because, again, they belong to crowded sections of the roster, and in the case of Geo, there's no insect feeder. Another honorable mention is the ichthyosaurs. I didn't have a slot for an ichthyosaur in my aquatic roster. It feels really weird to cut an entire category of iconic aquatic reptiles from the game. If anything, this is the biggest sticking point for my list. To me, the 87th animal is Ichthyosaurus. But ultimately, just because of how sidelined lagoons feel, with like how little emphasis lagoon animals have been given beyond Mosasaurus, I just couldn't justify including more slots for the lagoons, and we have evidence for most of the rest of the roster being included, so something had to give. And the thing that had to give was the Ichthyosaurs, both Ichthyosaurus and Shonisaurus. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that I'm wrong on that, but you know, if the whole thing was correct, that'd be crazy. So I should be wrong on a few things. So yeah, that's the roster. Yeah, sound off. Shout out in the comments how you think I'm wrong this time, because I probably am. There'll definitely be little bits of logic that I've overlooked or haven't thought about, and I appreciate hearing from other people what they think makes it in, and tear apart my arguments, please. I want holes to be poked in this. Convince me I'm wrong. That's good. That's discourse. Yeah, so that's probably enough rambling here on this video. It's been a long presentation, so we should probably get to the end of this. So yeah, until next time.